today. It is an honor to be part of this very impressive lineup, I have to say. You're barely 3 hours into the summit, and you've already heard from my good friend and fellow Kansan Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, the governors of Kentucky and New Jersey, Google CEO Sudhanshu Pai, and the NASDAQ CEO Donna Friedman. I don't know if you have lined up for day 2, but it's got to be pretty impressive. Perhaps the Indian version of the Avengers. Priyanka Chopra, Salman Khan, and Virat Kohli. Anyway, so the bar has been set very high, but with my fellow distinguished panelists, Sudhanshu and moderator Jim, I think we're up to the challenge, I dare say. And I actually have a story to share about Jim's company, American Tower. Jim hinted at this visit that I made. Last October, as he mentioned, I was at the India Local Conference and had a chance to visit with some of my government counterparts as well as some of the private sector leaders, but also during this trip, I had a chance to visit what Jim's company called Digital Village. Outside New Delhi, in a very dusty neighborhood, I had a chance to check out an American Tower cell site. And this cell site is critical to providing thousands of Indians, predominantly lower income Indians, with some of them only digital access to the outside world, which is that mobile phone. And the fiber that feeds this cell site is also used for internet kiosks that teach low-income kids math and reading and other basic skills, how to put together a resume, for example. And it really is helping the local community. As a person of South Asian descent myself, I can't describe what it meant to see the look on these kids who were so eager to learn, to improve their own situations and that of their families. And I really appreciate the efforts that Jim and his team have made. They don't have to do this, they do it because it's the right thing to do. And it improves not just that community and the entire country, it improves the world, I dare say. So thank you for that effort. And to me, Digital Village and the ethos that inspires it perfectly captures the value, I think, of the U.S. India Business Council and the collaboration that it promotes. American Tower benefits from the opportunity to expand its business, to enter into an exciting new market, and the people of India benefit from expanded access to what I call digital opportunity. Everyone, at the end of the day, is better off. And the chance to promote mutual growth and prosperity is why I'm excited to work with groups like the USIBC and my peers in the Indian government. In fact, on my very first international trip as chairman of the FCC, I met with my Indian counterparts, the chairman of the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, or TRAI, R.S. Sharma. I've gotten to know him so well now, I don't even call him chairman, I just call him uncle. I feel like he's part of my family, as those of you who are Desi will appreciate, I'm sure. But during that first visit, we charted a plan for enhanced collaboration, and we signed a letter of intent formalizing that cooperation between our two agencies and our two governments. And since then, we have collaborated on a huge number of issues, from 5G spectrum issues to attacking robocalls, all kinds of things that are common to our two countries. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to meet with you today and to continue to build on that foundation. Now, we've already heard a couple of presentations about promoting technology and innovation. In particular, Sundar's discussion on ushering in a connected future. So by now, you probably have a pretty high-level picture of some of the opportunities that digital technologies can open up and why that matters. For this session, of course, we're going to get a little bit deeper into the weeds to talk about how to deploy the physical infrastructure that makes this innovation possible. Now, in thinking of what areas to highlight, I thought that I would use the Indian government's framing of this issue, in particular, the National Digital Communications Policy, which I think, which as you know, was released in September of 2018. This strategy is organized around 3 central pillars: Connect India, Propel India, and Secure India. And I think this is a useful way to think about our own work at the FCC. And I'll talk about the strategies that we are pursuing to make sure that everybody can access modern communications, connect, to unleash next generation technologies, Propel, and finally to guard against threats to our networks, secure. And I'll start briefly with Connect. In the US, we believe that a competitive free market is the most powerful force we have for driving investment and innovation in networks. And that is why the FCC has removed many regulatory barriers to help lower the costs and speed up the process of building broadband infrastructure. To make it easier to install wireless infrastructure like small cells, we set a reasonable deadline for cities to rule on siting applications and reasonable limits on siting fees. We also eliminated federal red tape to make sure that infrastructure that is the size of a pizza box doesn't have to jump through the same regulatory hoops as infrastructure like a 200-foot cell tower. We also convened a panel of outside experts from industry, from state and local government, and from the nonprofit community. We call this our Broadband Deployment Advisory Committee. And among other things, this committee laid the foundation for the FCC to enact a groundbreaking reform known as One Touch, Make Ready, a very complicated set of reforms, but essentially makes it cheaper and easier for competitive fiber providers to gain access to utility poles to string fiber in different parts of the country. We've also modernized rules to make it easier for carriers to transition away from the last century's technology of copper and toward the current century's technology of fiber. And we also scrapped utility-style regulations for broadband that were derived from rules that were developed in the 1930s. A lot of different reforms, a lot of different areas, but the bottom line is that our policies are now working, and the evidence is accumulating to show that this is true. In 2018, more fiber was deployed to more new homes in the United States than in any year since they've been keeping records. As well, small cell deployment more than quadrupled. Average broadband speeds are up 40% year over year from December 2017 until December 2018. And just this week, we learned that aggregate broadband investment was up $3 billion in 2018 over the previous year. It's particularly notable because network investment fell in 2015 and 2016, the last 2 years before I came into office. Of course, despite the good news, millions of Americans still live in rural areas, lower income urban areas, where there's currently just no business case for deploying this infrastructure if you're a private sector company. As is the case in India, in parts of, for example, Assam, or Uttarakhand, or Karnataka, where my family is from, we have communities here too, in Alaska, and Utah, and Kansas, that don't have access. And to connect these communities, both in India and especially here in the United States, we need to think creatively. Here in the United States, we have something called the Universal Service Fund that my agency oversees, and that provides federal subsidies to broadband providers to leverage additional investment. We've begun allocating some of this support by using what's called a reverse auction, essentially inviting a bunch of different companies using a variety of different technologies to compete for federal subsidies. This harnesses market forces and, of course, a diverse array of technologies to maximize the effectiveness and efficiency of this public investment. In fact, just this week, we authorized $167 million in universal service subsidies to connect 600,000 unserved homes and businesses, some of the hardest to serve areas of this country. Now, obviously, India too has connectivity challenges that are different, but somewhat similar in terms of nature and scale. And so I, of course, commend the Prime Minister and the Indian government for their ambitious goals of universal access, internet access by 2022, and fixed broadband access to 50% of households in that same year. To meet these new targets, Prime Minister Modi and his government are pursuing some pretty bold strategies, such as installing 2 million public Wi-Fi hotspots in rural areas, and redesigning and expanding the Universal Service Obligation Fund. These are important steps that I think will bear fruit in the time to come. Now, turning from Connect, the first part of the digital strategy, there is our work to propel next generation technologies, especially 5G, as Jim mentioned. Many of our actions that I already mentioned to speed up wireless infrastructure deployment are what Jim referred to as what we call our 5G Fast Plan, a comprehensive plan to facilitate America's superiority in 5G technologies. Another part of our plan is making additional spectrum, wireless airwaves, available for 5G development. Already this year, we've held spectrum auctions in the 28 and 24 gigahertz bands. We are going to be conducting on December 10th an auction of the 37, 39, and 47 gigahertz bands. We also have proceedings to look at all kinds of spectrum in mid-bands, from 2.5, 3.5, to 3.7, to 4.7, 4.9, to 6 gigahertz as well. We're pretty busy when it comes to spectrum, is the bottom line. And in particular, we're going to be auctioning off a 3.5 gigahertz band next year, which will be very important. But overall, what matters is not the list of bands or the types of infrastructure being deployed, but what 5G could be useful for. And here, I'm truly convinced that 5G will be very different from the 4G predecessor technologies in the past. I think it will be transformative in terms of various industries, enabling things like telemedicine, and precision agriculture, industrial IoT, and automotive safety, gaming, and public safety, especially when you think about its conjunction with artificial intelligence, blockchain, quantum computing, some of the adjacent technologies that are being developed. I think we stand on the breakthrough, on the brink of some breakthroughs we can't even conceive of today. I'm very excited about the future that is going to be coming. Finally, I'll briefly highlight some of the things we're doing to make sure that our communications networks are secure. One of our top priorities of the U.S. government is to ensure that our communications networks and our supply chain have integrity and are secure. And that is why the FCC has proposed to prohibit the use of broadband funding from being used by companies on equipment or services that have been determined to present a national security threat to communications networks or to that supply chain. That is also why the FCC recently denied the application of China Mobile USA, which is a wireless carrier ultimately owned and operated by the Chinese government, to provide international telecommunications services here in the United States. That is why last month I was honored to be a part of the United States delegation that traveled to Prague for an important conference on how best to secure our 5G networks. This meeting featured government officials from more than 30 countries, as well as industry leaders. And at this gathering, we were able to develop a set of consensus best practices for 5G security. Now, when making decisions that impact 5G security in particular, we need to remember that the implications are very wide-ranging. 5G will affect our militaries, our industries, our critical infrastructure, and much more. The procurement and deployment decisions that are being made today will have a generational impact on our security, our economy, and our society. When it comes to 5G, we cannot afford to make risky choices and simply hope for the best. We must see clearly the threats that are facing, that our networks face, and we must act to address those threats. And the more that allies like the United States and India can work together and make security decisions based on shared principles, the safer that our 5G networks will be. And I can say firsthand, having spoken to a number of my counterparts, from Chairman Sharma to Secretary Sudhanshu and many other leaders in the Indian government, they understand the nature of this issue as well, and they are committed to working with us to help address that. Now, these are just some of the strategies that we're pursuing at the FCC to enable our citizens to benefit from the digital revolution. I look forward to exploring other strategies with you, esteemed panelists and others, and to working with you in the days to come to connect, to propel, and to secure the digital futures of the United States and India, which after all are two strong allies. And so long as I'm chairman of this agency, we'll continue to be two good friends. Thank you very much for your attention. Look forward to a good conversation.
India's fastest growing entertainment networks, going from just 6 channels to 50 under your leadership. Now the host of iconic brands that offer diverse content to the people of India, which are themselves very diverse. So congratulations to you on your company's success so far. And additionally, you stand out, now we're talking about you, as an industry leader serving as the chairman of the Confederation of Indian Industries Media and Entertainment Council, and as a leader on the Broadcast Audience Research Council in India. So you're the expert on Indian media content, and we're really pleased to have you here.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So let me start off with you, Sudhanshu, and the first question. You're leading an industry that's undergoing really a seismic shift in your country. It has a fantastically rich heritage of entertainment business through Bollywood and other vehicles. But how are you finding the right balance between addressing today's daily operational challenges, which you get measured on, and planning for the next big thing in the future of media in India? And is there anything we can learn back here in the U.S. from what you're doing?
Thank you, and a great question. I think that is always a challenge as to, how do you manage what is for today and continue to plan for tomorrow. But the good news when you are in a country like India is that, it is an and country, so there is room for, and I define it as an and market. So, and what I mean by that is, if you look at the country, there are close to about 300 million homes which are there in India. There are about 200 million homes who have television, and there are 100 million homes who don't have television. So even for a business like television, which is linear television, there is room for growth. And I think therefore that will be the additional people who will come in. At the same time, digital is sort of growing considerably over the top and entire piece there. And that is growing like anywhere else in the market, anywhere else in the world. So therefore, if you look at it, we currently have 1.1 billion Indians having mobiles. of which about 850 million Indians have, so there are some who have 850 unique individuals who own mobiles. And that is growing very rapidly, about 400 million smartphones which are growing rapidly. So I think that is a piece where, so the way we look at, as the way we address this in a manner of speaking is we look at ourselves as content company. We don't look at ourselves as a TV company or a film company or a digital, digital studio or a digital company. Because what we are saying is we are in the business of storytelling and we are a content company. And we've defined our mission as, very simply speaking, our mission is to take every story to its audience and every audience to its story. So in a way, you are there screen and pipe agnostic. So therefore, and so therefore as these keep changing, you are already ready for it. And that's an interesting thing, but we actually launched the digital platform under the brand name Boot in India in 2016, about 3 years back. And in the Viacom community, we were within Viacom globally, we were the first country to go absolutely digital. And that is at the time when people said, no, why do you need to go digital? And we also launched an advertising-led video on demand service. And then followed it with subscription, because in India, people won't pay. And I think now the good news is that some of the work which we've done there is being replicated in Viacom as well. So I think the latest acquisition of Pluto in US, and therefore that leading that with advertising and all, I think is an interesting piece. There's a work which we are doing on segmented digital product called Boot Kids. And interesting thing about Boot Kids is it goes well beyond watch. So therefore there is watch which is there, so entire videos, and we've got a good collection. Actually we currently have a partnership with Turner as well. Loosely speaking, there is everything outside of Disney on that in terms of watch protection. So that's good for kids. But we've gone well beyond watch. So there is watch, there is read, so there are ebooks there. There is listen, so you can listen to nursery rhymes and to the audio books. And finally there is learn piece. Therefore there is watch, read, listen and learn. And learning is like gaming, to try and understand what things are doing. And there's a parental control, so you are then saying how screen time can be good for your kids. So you're basically flipping the entire insight where most parents feel, for young children particularly, and arguably for all children, that screen time is junk time. We are saying, let the screen time count. Good for your child, count for your child. So that's another work which we are doing, which again, the work which we are doing in India is now moving forward. I think that's the way.
Interesting. Chairman Pai and his counterparts in India, they're trying to set the regulatory framework so you can grow into these new businesses. And companies like ours are trying to make sure we can design the infrastructure and get the signal out there where you need it so people can have access to the content. You're in the middle of India of a 4G acceleration. We just mentioned how many smartphones are out there. It's more smartphones and there are all kinds of phones of any type in the United States already and growing even faster. But what's 5G going to mean? Can you tell us about the future a little bit more, about augmented reality or virtual reality as part of the entertainment platform that people can someday have access to because of maybe 5G or other technology?
Yeah, so 5G would mean a lot for a country like India, like it would for anywhere, as Commissioner Pai was saying. I think for us, particularly in entertainment, and then I'll get into the other use cases, but specifically entertainment, I think your ability to then do augmented reality and virtual reality will go up. The kind of work which you could do. India, as you know, is crazy for Bollywood and the Bollywood stars. Now, if I could do augmented reality, we do a lot of reality in India. We are house to some of the largest international formats from across the world are done on our stations. So imagine many of these celebrities with augmented reality you could sort of feel they could be next to you. It's like meeting them. So I think it will be fascinating for the customers as we do these things and for audiences. So there is a lot of scope in that space. But I think IoT is also a game changer for India, as in 5G and with IoT. I think the kind of stuff which you can do with 5G, and therefore not only in media as we understand, but in education, in healthcare, and particularly for a country like India where quality access to some of these things is as of now is denied, to be honest with you. So I think with technology and with digital, it will be able to give access to all Indians. And like we say in India that digital is transformational because digital has opened up the opportunities for everyone. I personally feel 5G will be the step next to it, which is when it not only opens the opportunity for everyone, but it makes access to each of these states, access which is very critical in India, because that's been a challenge, and that'll be really good. Access to good teachers, access to good doctors, access to quality medical care, which today, because of the lack of technology, is largely physical. And I think, imagine all of that becoming, you could do it without necessarily being in physical proximity. That's the big change.
And we have some gaps in the United States culture and economy too. One of them, Chairman Pai, is the skills gap, as it's called. So between the training, ability, background of people to do perhaps traditional jobs, but not really qualified for the jobs of the future in coding and other kinds of things, or high-tech repairs and manufacturing, other types of industries that are for the future, not the past. Do you see a path that augmented reality and 5G and virtual reality can help train people in a way where, say, whether it's goggles, working your way through a instruction manual and other factors to get these gaps in skills closed in the United States so even more people can have jobs and employment can go even lower?
I do think that's tip of the iceberg in terms of workforce development of the future, and it's amazing even now today. For example, I was recently thinking about can I learn how to tie a bow tie? And so I went to YouTube, typed it in, and tried to teach myself how to make a rudimentary bow tie. You can imagine in the future with things like augmented reality for much higher purposes, like being trained to work on a tower or to develop some sort of application. You could easily engage in augmented reality or virtual reality. And that's something that a lot of the skilled professionals are looking at as well. For example, for medical schools, one of the things they're thinking about is using high definition virtual reality to train the medical students in the future on surgery without having to be invasive with an actual patient. But that can also apply to all kinds of other skills. For example, climbing a tower is hard work. I've actually done it once. Climbed a 130-foot tower in western Colorado. Much to my wife's chagrin, she made sure I updated the life insurance policy before I did that. But it gave me a first-hand appreciation for how complicated the task is. And you can't, as you know better than anybody, you can't learn on the job just when you're out there in the field. You have to practice a lot. And I can imagine that augmented reality can help you understand, okay, when you're carrying a bunch of 5G antennas, you can do that in a virtual environment much easier, much more cheaply, much more safely than you could in the field. So I think it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Right. So maybe bring this all together back to you, Sudhanshu, for a second. Talking about this digital infrastructure, which the chairman has referred to. This week, everyone in this room is a beneficiary of people coming together from India, the United States, and both governments. And the ambassadors are actually both sitting in the front row for Secretary Pompeo. I mean, we're getting in this building over this couple of days here, the best minds in government and industry together to try to collaborate. What examples have you seen, because you're in a global company as well, where you were able to, at least within your business or across partners, bring a better solution than otherwise would have just come out of India or just come out of the U.S. media market? Were there some collaborative wins that you've seen in your career here?
I've always seen, actually, I've been a big votary of partnership, and I think, there are always examples of when you can collaborate and do better, and in the modern world. So I want to give you one example of the work which we've done with Google. And that is so basically, in India, as I was just saying some time back, there are about 1 billion mobile connections, but there are only about 400 million smartphones. So there are about 600 million or 700 million feature phones. But the question is that they also want to enjoy video and they want to enjoy app. Now, but there is no capacity in that phone to be able to do that on Android handsets. So what we developed with Google is what we call Progressive Web App, PWA. So which is like, it's a web application, but it basically plays for the consumer like an app in a web environment. And I think that is the first time it was done anywhere in the world on video by Google as well. So it was basically got Innovation of the Year award at IBC, and now it's being rolled out elsewhere with the partners. So I think that's one example of the stuff which we are doing. I think in general, we are working with many companies in trying to understand what best we can apply to India first. But in learning for India, there is always, scope for solution or everywhere else. And as I told you recently, in the beginning I was telling you, some of the work which we're doing is useful for Viacom and vice versa. So we learn, I think, even from the work that we've done on some of the applications and things which are there, particularly learning applications and all that.
So even when situations where there are competitors in some spaces, let's say, you can get together and create something to the benefit of everyone. So I want to turn back to Chairman Pai because I think you might be the best person in the U.S., if not the world, to answer this. Okay, so put you on the spot.
I was going to say, raise expectations for you. Yeah.
That's right. Well, you're very familiar with India as a country, India's people, its government, in your prior roles. And one of the themes that the Modi administration is really brought to the forefront in India is connecting cities through a smart cities mission, if you will. And there's 100 cities in India that have been designated to be the future smart cities in the country. And the government's allocated about $7.5 billion to try to do this. Now you divide that by 100, that's not much per city. So the industry is going to have to be heavily involved in this, both Indian industry and perhaps even Western or U.S. industry. So as the person sort of straddling both these worlds, what are a couple of somewhat tangible ideas that you could provide to the audience to say, look, for a U.S. company that wants to play the Indian smart city game and deal with Make in India and Digital India policies that are on their side, what could you offer as advice? How do we participate?
Well, that's a good question. So I think first and foremost is to persuade Indian policymakers about the value proposition at stake. For example, it's one thing to say, okay, I want to come in and install 500,000 small cells in your city. The typical policymaker on the local level might not understand exactly what that means, other than it will require a ton of paperwork to be processed. But when you describe the impact that it will have, if we install these 500,000 small cells, imagine the smart cities applications that would enable. For example, you can spend much less on powering lights that are in very low traffic neighborhoods at certain times of the day. You can monitor traffic patterns in order to more adequately manage congestion. And in terms of public safety, you can make sure that if somebody needs to call the Indian equivalent of 911, they are able to reach someone who can help. These are the types of things that immediately appeal, I think, to local regulators and policymakers, regardless of what country they happen to be in. The other thing is impressing upon them the difficulty of building some of these networks. A lot of people simply assume that the internet shall exist, it will always exist, and thus it shall be so. Broadband infrastructure, I don't care where you are in the world, it's very hard to build. It's capital intensive, there are a lot of regulatory hoops to jump through, and in many cases, investors are very skeptical. As of course, the publicly traded CEO would know, they're always looking for what is the return on the investment? What does the next quarter show, the quarter after that? And if I don't see it, I'm not going to be lending the money to do these projects. And so I think impressing upon some of our counterparts in India, the fact that there's a tremendous potential in the country, with this, Sudhanshu was pointing out, hundreds of millions of mobile subscribers who are yearning for better, faster, cheaper internet access. The potential of those applications and services is great, but it can't be realized unless the government and industry work together to realize it.
And even maybe benefit the municipality from a cost perspective to the municipality.
Absolutely.
And 10th, both in the India and U.S. environments, the municipalities look at this as a taxing opportunity and don't really look at the cost savings or the consumer benefit opportunity. So that's an educational role, I guess, for all of us to try to build on. Right? So let's jump from the inner city to the rural areas for a minute, because again, Chairman Pai, you've got great familiarity both in the U.S. and India with rural life. Digital infrastructure, as you said, to support cities and rural areas is not only essential, it's hard to build sometimes. And hard to fund if you're just a private company, hence the universal service funds in both countries, which again, a good idea, bridging both societies. You addressed some initiatives again yourself. You joined with President Trump just a little while ago with an intent to invest $20 billion to create a rural digital opportunity fund in the United States and to widen the access for people that don't live in the mega cities of America. So what do you think is the next step for whether it's the administration or business to really get broadband service to people out in more rural areas?
It's a difficult challenge. I think in many cases, as I pointed out, the private sector business case for deployment simply doesn't exist. There are many parts of this country, as there are in India as well, where there simply aren't enough people per square mile or square kilometer. Those people tend to have lower incomes. And in addition to that, in this country especially, there are many topological challenges. For example, it could be an Alaska Native village above the Arctic Circle where the ground is literally frozen every single day of the year. Or it could be a part of Florida, which is hurricane prone. And so that makes different technologies like aerial fiber very difficult because the utility poles could be snapped if there's a single hurricane. So we need to think very creatively about solving that problem. One tool in the toolbox is federal subsidies, which I mentioned. But the federal government only has so much money, and that's why over the last 2.5 years under my leadership, we've been focused on trying to promote much more innovation and investment, especially from non-traditional players. For example, we've approved the first ever non-geostationary satellite constellations at companies like OneWeb and SpaceX and Leosat and Kepler and others, who are looking to send up hundreds of thousands of satellites into low Earth orbit to beam internet access into rural, tribal, and remote areas at a speed and a price point that would be comparable. We're looking to get more spectrum out there into the commercial marketplace for fixed wireless companies to use. Often these are mom and pop shops that live in a very small town. My own parents in my hometown in Parsons, Kansas, were customers of one for many years. These are the folks who might be able to fill that gap if we can't directly build fiber. And in trying to include electric utilities as well. In the 1930s and 1940s, as many people know, there was a national mission in this country to get every American on the electric grid. I draw inspiration from that effort, and I have to think that if we could connect all these rural communities with electricity in the 1930s in the midst of the Great Depression, we should be able to do that with broadband in the 21st century, and that includes getting electric utilities who have a very deep footprint in this country into the broadband business. And so, from our perspective, we might not be able to fund every broadband project, but we want to encourage every single company, big or small, urban or rural, to get into the game.
So opening the door to a big tent, so to speak, to get more players in the game.
Absolutely. I firmly believe in technological neutrality. I could care less what company or technology is used to connect people with what I call digital opportunity. I firmly believe, though, that every American, just as every Indian, deserves to have internet access in order to better himself or herself in their communities.
And along that same theme, people in rural India deserve a similar opportunity. And one of the things that I've learned by the many years I've been visiting Indian business is you may be speaking English in business meetings or when you go through the airport, but when you get out into the countryside of India, how many languages are there at last count to try to really serve people in addition to just the English?
Yes, at least 60. Although I think the number is now 23, but 16 languages is something which you need to sort of, be able to do some of those. So therefore that piece is very critical. Also, I think just building on the rural piece, see, and like Commissioner Pai said, I think the thinking, I think we need to, we've got to change our legacy mindsets at every level. I think it starts with private sector players, it starts from with corporations, it starts with governments, it starts with regulators. I think we've got to look at some of these things as a backbone which is provided. And then that could be public-private or public-private partnership. And then you have nodes which pull out, exactly like you use a very good example of it, like this thing. I think the same thing will need to be done, and in India the challenge is even bigger because there are 625,000 villages, of which, and there are and you've got to reach out to them, and some of them are also very distant and, very far-flung in some places. So the last time, there is no private sector case at all, exactly like you mentioned. So the government of India is also embarked on this is about a $10 billion project in India, where it's called BharatNet, where they are trying to connect these far-flung in the rural areas. But my view is that the government of India the government should provide the backbone, but the access and utilization should then be left to private, and through a set or something on the private, you keep funding it or fund it for the future. I think that's the kind of model we will have to follow, which is in partnership for us to be able to develop this properly. That's the concept.
I was just going to add, I agree with Sudhanshu's vision. I would say in India in particular, the return on the investment for the entire country would be tremendous. There's a very famous economics paper that you can find on the internet, it's publicly available, talking about the entry of 2G services in Kerala. It's about fishermen in Kerala who previously had to work through a middleman to sell their fish.
Yes.
And what they found is the fluctuations in prices that these fishermen would get were huge. Some days they might do very well, some days they might not be able to feed their families, and it's in part because they didn't have access to all the prices that other middlemen were charging. And if you look at the introduction of 2G cell phones, they did a measurement. It's incredible how the incomes of these fishermen went up and became much more stable simply because of the introduction of this phone. That's 2G in the mid-2000s. Imagine what 4G, 5G would do for these rural communities. We're talking about a huge increase in wealth, and that's just wealth. You talk about them being healthier, happier, communities being stronger and safer. I just think there's a lot of untapped potential in rural India, and I'm excited to see what the Prime Minister's initiative there is.
And just like the group on the stage, the last point you mentioned, public-private partnership. And when people say that, they often industry recoils in horror because that means some sort of joint venture, I don't have full control, it's 50-50, or it's going to be a big tax issue. But it doesn't have to be that. It can be collaborating, or just communicating even. And I'll give you a really quick example of that. The program that you described, in billions of dollars of fiber being laid in India, they were being landed or ended at the local government village office.
Yes.
There were no people there, there was no transmission site there, there was no Wi-Fi, internet connection. But a lot of those got marked off as success, right? And once we started working with the governments to suggest that let's get at least close enough to a tower, whether it's ours or it's Airtel or someone else's, that at least we can transmit from the end of your fiber cable. That's going to be a better investment for you. We'll invest now, and so will our customers in getting the signal out there. So public-private partnership doesn't have to be an owner's joint venture where all the value is taken away. It can just be communication and collaboration in the planning stages. Great. So turning back to Chairman Pai, your interest in India and your participation in the World Congress last year. You stated that Prime Minister Modi's Digital India highlights internet connectivity, and this is your quote, which has the power to empower, which you just described in a few more words. You actually added another comment to that, which was worth repeating, saying that high-speed connectivity enables democratization of entrepreneurship. What does that mean, and how does that help people in India that want to either start small businesses or take an idea and move it into an actual company?
To me, what it means is that anybody, anywhere, who has an interesting business idea is able to pursue it, so long as he or she has a broadband connection. I've seen this here in the United States, in small communities that you'll never see on the front pages of the newspapers or featured on television, but there are entrepreneurs out there who have great ideas, and once they get a global customer base via the internet, they're able to do incredible things. And I've seen the same in India as well. A few years ago, one of my favorite visits, second of course to Digital Village, was in Bangalore, where I had to visit on the outskirts of the city, and I had the chance to see a micro-lending operation where a number of lower-income women, for the first time, were getting some microloans to pursue some of their business ideas. And the way they received this information, this money rather, was on their phones, because that was the one source of technology they had that they themselves owned. They didn't have to go through their husbands or anybody else to get it. They controlled the money themselves. And in talking to some of these women about what they were trying to do, it was just incredible, because you could see not just the interesting idea they might have, but just the sense of hope and optimism about the future that enabled. It's just tremendous. And I think there's something about entrepreneurship that really springs from the human heart. It's not limited to Silicon Valley or Mumbai. It's just one of those things that people want to take charge of their own future. One of the great things about this digital platform is that anybody can do that. And Sudhanshu, of course, has done it in incredible fashion, as you said, going from 6 to 50 channels. There are many others in India who deserve the same opportunity, and I think they will get that opportunity in the years to come.
And as maybe a final point before we wrap up, you've also touched on startup hubs or innovation hubs. How small and remote could those be, and what else do you need besides a broadband connection to create them?
Honestly, just a broadband connection and the will to take the risk. It's that entrepreneur's spirit is something that I think many people have around the country, and I definitely salute those who have done it. And you too, to start off with your original comments, it's incredible for those of us who remember what India was like in the 1980s. I still remember visiting my grandmother in Bangalore, and emblazoned in my brain is we would sit around the TV watching the state-owned broadcaster Doordarshan, because what else are you going to watch? That was it. And emblazoned in my brain is the theme song for the intro, and I can still remember it because that's all you would. You guys remember this? It's unbelievable. So for those of us with a memory, to go from that to this, where you have an entrepreneur, a single entrepreneur, opening up 50 new channels to watch young Indians who are interested in the Indian Premier League, watch Chennai take on Mumbai Indians, to see all of Bollywood being watched by everybody from high-tech CEOs to rickshaw drivers on their phones. I mean, it is incredible. One of the things I love about
the same cricket match at the same time.
Oh, it's amazing. It's one of the things I love about India and Indians is that we will find a way. They will all, you know what I mean? There's just that zeal to find a way to deliver value. There's, have infrastructure problems, regulatory barriers, we will find a way. And it's that kind of spirit, I think, that really animates the subcontinent and frankly just makes me proud to be an Indian.
Absolutely, and
advancements. Digress there.
I'll digress for one more second because advancement is something everybody wants, and I remember putting some throwbacks here. My dad having 3 box TVs set up watching football, and there were only 3 channels, and I was the remote control.
Yes.
Yeah, there was no change that to channel 2.
And all the rabbit ears just so
exactly. So we're all appreciative of progress, and I'm incredibly astounded and impressed by the progress you've made in bringing so much more to India's population as far as content, learning, and entertainment. A fantastic story. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Chairman Pai, we've admired what you've been doing at the FCC and your leadership. You're fearless in getting out in front of things that can be pretty rough sometimes because not everyone agrees all the time with some of the ideas, but everyone in industry is behind you and supports your vision.
Thanks, and tell all your friends.
I will. Those that will listen. So, in respect of your time, we want to go ahead and close up the day. I want to thank both of you for the time this afternoon. I hope many folks will get to see clips of this, both in India and the U.S., because these are important remarks and important insights from both of you. Appreciation to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, USIBC, Disha, if she's still standing somewhere in this building because she's had a busy day. Thank you as well. And we really appreciate the opportunity, and I as the chairman, or co-chair, I should say, with Chandra Tata of the U.S. India CEO Forum. Our goal is to try to have net job creation in both our countries, and technology and media can be a driving force in that. So we're going to pick up exactly where we left off here and keep working.
Thank you. Thank you.